Hey everyone, welcome back to Reissued. If you're new here, my name is Andrew. Today we are going to be tackling part 2 of the living room built-ins. Now, a couple weeks ago, I showed you how we assembled the base cabinets and the upper bookcases using mostly thrifted materials. And today we're going to complete the upper part of the built-in wall with some super secret hidden storage. Now, you know we are no stranger to hidden storage here at Reissued. We did the hidden pull-out units in both bathrooms, as well as the hidden medicine cabinet picture storage in the primary bathroom. So what's one more? Let's do it again in the living room. I can't wait to get started and show you how we turn concealed storage into a chic paneled wall look. Let's jump on in. Okay, so before we get started today, if you want to follow along with the progress in the living room and you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We have one more installment coming in the living room built-in series where I'm going to do some styling, so stay tuned for that. And as always, if you like this video and you love how this project turns out at the end, go ahead and hit the like button. Okay, so last time I mentioned that we used thrifted kitchen cabinets and IKEA Hinges units to create the shelves. We didn't have enough units to go all the way up to the 12-foot ceiling, so we needed a way to extend the unit all the way up that blended with and added to the existing look. After lots of thinking and brainstorming, my parents and I decided that it would be best to do some sort of concealed storage up here, both as a place to store some holiday decor and project materials, but also as a way to complete the whole look of this wall. Putting cabinet doors on here would be tricky because we would have to match the ones at the bottom, and those were thrifted. I'm not sure that I could find those again, but also I think it would look a bit top heavy to have cabinet doors this high up unless they were glass doors, which would kind of defeat the purpose of hidden storage. So the idea here is to make this look like a solid wall that has sort of a paneled molding detail on it. But we don't want to lose that added storage space, so we need those panels to open out and provide some concealed storage. I was able to find a couple of reference images that had this effect, but I was not able to find instructions anywhere online on how to execute this. So naturally, my parents and I had to figure it out ourselves. So in case you want to do something similar in your space, I wanted to dedicate an entire video to walking you through the process. Let's do it. Now, first things first, I mentioned last time that we built some plywood boxes to create the base for this storage area. We used 3/4 inch furniture grade plywood for the bottom and sides, and 1/4 inch plywood for the back and top. A strip of thrifted wood across the back top corner helps the thin plywood to join more securely. With the boxes constructed, we can pop these in place on top of the 2x4 structure that surrounds the Hinges units below. Once we get the placement right, my dad screws the boxes into the structure to hold them in place, adding shims where necessary to make the piece level and square. Then we can cut the wood that will become the doors and facings. My dad cuts down another piece of 3/4 inch furniture grade plywood in half lengthwise, since that will just about cover our opening, and we want to use as little material as possible here since new wood adds up quickly. To create the best seam possible, he runs the saw along the edge at a 45-degree angle to allow one piece to lay over the other. It's not a perfect seam solution, but it's better than a butt joint. Then we can cut the other ends to length so that the two pieces will fit together on our wall. My dad drills and screws each piece of plywood at 6 points to hang this over the boxes and allow us to mark the placement for the doors. Meanwhile, Queenie waits patiently for her bark box to arrive.
Queenie, your bark box is here. Your bark box is here. Oh! This way.
And it's here! So let's open her bark box, which is the sponsor of today's video. BarkBox is a subscription box for your dog delivered monthly to your door. This month's theme is Knights of Namor, kind of a medieval fantasy vibe, which is super fun. Look at this little dragon! Each box is customizable for your dog's preferences and allergies, and comes with 2 original toys, 2 full bags of treats, and 1 chew. But if you sign up right now, you'll get a double deluxe first box with 4 toys and 4 treats. Queenie is so smart and energetic, and it can be tough to keep her stimulated. So BarkBox is a great way to change up her toys and keep her motivated to try new tricks and perfect her old tricks.
Roll over.
So if you want to keep your dog sharp and curious, be sure to click the link down in the description to get your double deluxe first box from BarkBox. Okay, so we have our plywood screwed in place temporarily, and now we need to mark the doors. Now, originally when I came up with this design, I was thinking that each panel up top would align with the bookcase below, but that would make some of the doors really small and they wouldn't all be the same size and it might look kind of strange. So we're opting to do 4 doors that are all the same size and spacing them out evenly with the ceiling. This might look a little strange in some areas because the lower bookcases won't line up with these doors, but I think if the panels line up the ceiling, it will tie those 2 elements together and make everything feel really unified. So once the door placements are marked to match the ceiling details, we unscrew and remove the plywood to cut the doors. First, we mark everything again to clean up the squareness and symmetry prior to cutting. Then my dad uses a circular saw to make the cuts.
So this is what keeps it straight, is you just go like this and you push down with the engine running and that's it.
Okay.
And notice I've got my thumb on the guard.
Okay. The tricky part here is making a plunge cut to start. He lines up the blade along the inside edge of the line, balancing the saw on the front edge of the guide. He lifts up the guard to fully expose the blade and starts the saw. Then once the blade is at full speed, keeping the blade aligned with the marked line, he plunges the saw along the line by tipping it backward until it fully lands on the guide. Then he can continue to cut as usual along the line. Once he reaches the end of the line, he can go back the other way to get to the other end of the line. And repeat this process for all 4 sides of the door. This is definitely an advanced technique and not for everybody. I know I'm not brave enough or skilled enough to do this, but if you or someone you know is competent and confident with power tools, this is a great way to create a hidden storage moment where the door disappears into the facing with only a saw blade width gap. This is the same technique that was used in the guest bath to create the hidden storage pullout. Only this time we're going to use a molding along the edge, so it's a little less important to get a totally perfect cut. However, if this feels like it's outside of your wheelhouse, you can drill a hole and use a jigsaw instead. It's harder to get a straight cut that way, but it will get the job done. I guess you also could cut all the way across and then reassemble the facings and then cut down the doors a little bit smaller to fit in the gap. That would just require a little bit more wood, and we need to stretch this as far as possible to keep it with just 1 sheet of plywood. After my dad cuts all 4 sides of the door, he uses a vibrating saw to complete the detail cuts in the corner. And now we can pop out the door. Because the vibrating saw blade was thinner than the circular saw blade, we have to take a little ridge off the corners of the doors with the vibrating saw, and then we can repeat this process for all of the doors. When my dad finishes up the cuts, I mark each door to make sure it goes back into the correct opening. I also start sanding the edges of all the cuts to remove any tearing or ridges. I was planning to band all of these edges with an iron-on veneer just to make things look super clean, but the plywood here was actually in really good shape and was able to be sanded down. And also my dad was concerned that adding extra thickness here in the gap would make the gap too small for this to easily open and close. But just keep in mind that if your cuts are rough, you could use a banding or wood filler to clean things up a bit and make sure it looks polished. Now that our doors are ready to go, let's move on to hardware. We're going to be using 3 different hardware pieces to achieve this effect. 1 is specialized hinges that will allow the door to pivot on itself so it doesn't hit at the top. 2 is going to be push to open latches so that we don't have to have any visible hardware. And 3, we're going to be adding some hydraulic struts that will help the door stay open while we access it. This is going to be especially important since the only way to access the storage will be 9 feet in the air atop a library ladder, so we need this to stay open. First, we want to add the hinges before we hang the facings so that we can be sure everything is aligned. So we use a Kreg drill jig, oh my god, and use a Kreg drill jig to drill out the holes for our hinges. We bought this when we did the DIY PAX doors in my bedroom last year, and it has certainly come in handy. The instructions on our hinges told us to choose the setting on our jig based on the width of the gap that we wanted between the facing and the door, and based on that, we're using the number 5 setting. We align the jig with the end of the door and drill the large hole in the center first. Then we can switch to a tiny drill bit to drill the smaller holes on either side for the attachment screws. And repeat. This jig is pricey, but it makes the process so easy. Before we attach the hinges, my mom primes and paints all of the pieces in the shade Storm Chaser from Magnolia to match the rest of the built-ins. Now we can place the doors in the openings, making sure that the gap is equidistant all the way around. Then we insert the hinges and screw them in, first to the door and then to the facing. And while I have this down still, I mark the center at the bottom of each door and attach the magnetic component of our push to open latches. It's so much easier to do this now than it will be when it's up on the scaffolding. Okay, I think we've done about as much as we can before putting these in place, so let's put these in place. My dad and I pop these up and screw them back into the holes where we attached them previously. Then we can start adding the push to open closures. First we measure the center of the opening and add a wood block that we cut and pre-painted. This fills the gap from the bottom of the cabinet to the bottom edge of the facing. We want this closure to sit on top of the facing, but we needed a little bit more depth here. My dad pre-drills this to prevent the block from splitting, and then screws the block down into the cabinet. Now he adds the main piece of the push to open latch, an inch and an eighth back from the facing. Each door was slightly different, so this depth needed to be adjusted multiple times to make the door sit as flush as possible with the facing when closed.
Seems like it's a little bit far in, but that might be okay.
Feels good here.
Okay, yeah, on this side it feels a little far in, but the trim will cover that.
Okay.
So he inserts 2 screws, we check the placement, and then we add the remaining 2 screws. Now, we noticed that some of the doors were slightly warped after painting or sitting around for dry times, so the facing and the doors didn't always sit flush at every point. So we did our best to create the most flushness in the most areas, but the molding that will go on later will hide all of these depth differences, so it's not really a big deal. Okay, almost there. The final piece of hardware to add is the hydraulic struts. In order to attach these, we need to cut and paint some additional wood strips to go along the inside of the opening. This will provide added strength and allow the struts to attach far enough back. My dad cuts these to length and screws them in along the sides of each opening. Our trim is going to go over this so he can pre-drill, countersink, and screw these in from the front. Now, as with most cheap hardware off of Amazon, the instructions for this are total crap. So everything was in millimeters, which is not what we usually use, but it's fine, except that the instructions were inconsistent from what was on the packaging to what was on the instruction manual. And there were a lot of different options depending on the angle that you wanted the door to open. So let me show you what we found worked for us. First, we mark 115 millimeters from the top of the door. I had to pull out a sewing tape measure to get something with millimeters. Then I placed the first piece aligned with that mark slightly inside the edge of the door to be sure that it would sit fully inside the opening and wouldn't hit the side as it closed. Pre-drill and screw it in. Then we pop in the strut and pop the other piece on the other end. I hold the door at the desired angle for when it's fully open, that's 90 degrees in our case, and then align the bottom piece flush with the back edge of our added block. This was just a good way of ensuring that all the placements would be the same. We drill and screw 1 or 2 screws in to lock this in place, then pop out the strut to add the remaining screws. Pop it back in, and it holds up our door. Now we rinse and repeat for both sides of every door. Now, I will note here that our push to open closures worked significantly better before the hydraulic struts went in. I think that the struts are keeping this from opening quite as wide when you push to open, so you kind of have to like edge your fingers in the side to be able to get the doors open here. So if you're doing this at home, my recommendation would be to use a different type of hardware that we used in the bathroom laundry pullout. We installed it upside down to get that tip up, but if you installed it right side up, it would also hold the doors open, but it wouldn't have the same power and force that the hydraulic struts are offering here. So I think that would make the push to open function better. I'm gonna link those down below too in case you wanna try that and let us know how it goes. Now that our doors are in place and functioning, let's clean up the finish with some molding. I found this molding at the REISSUED for $2 per 16-foot length, which is like the deal of the century. Molding is like the fastest way to add a cost to a project, so I was so happy to find enough to complete this project. My mom pre-painted all these so that they're ready to install. We measure every side of each opening individually to ensure the best fit. These will be the measurements of the inside corner of our mitered angles. So we mark the length, and then turn the miter saw to a 45-degree angle. Align the mark with the inside corner and chop. With all 4 pieces cut, we line them up along the edges of our opening and nail them in. It's important to get the last 2 pieces in at the same time and shift things around to make all 4 corners align perfectly before nailing them in. That way you don't end up with any misaligned corners. This part was so satisfying and really brought the whole look together. Okay, before we finish this up, I have a very exciting announcement. If you have ever thought to yourself or commented on one of my videos, I wish the reissue team could come to my house and help me with my space. Well, this is the next best thing. This month we are trying something new and doing a giveaway of a virtual room makeover. You send me some info about a space that you need help designing, and I'll share my design plan with paint colors, layout ideas, things to look for at the thrift store, DIY friendly projects, everything you need to get started on a beautiful reissued space. So I'm gonna drop all the details about how to enter down in the description box, and I'm going to choose 1 or more entries to feature in an upcoming video. Sounds fun, right? Okay, we're in the home stretch here. Let's tackle the final steps to complete the construction. We needed 2 facing pieces that will cover up the gaps and offer dimension. So we ripped down this thrifted wood into a wider piece that will become the attachment point for the library ladder later, and a slimmer piece that will help the top of the wall reach the crown molding. Since we wanted to use only 1 sheet of plywood, we have a little gap there at the top, so we're just gonna add this wood strip over and it'll add even more detail. What do you know? After giving these a good sanding, priming, and paint, we can put these in place. And let's go ahead and put the crown molding on the wall to connect this to the ceiling. This is the same crown molding that we pulled off the wall at the very start of this makeover when we took down the old ceiling. It was covered in tons of layers of paint and junk, so we stripped it down, sanded it down, and painted these in the same Storm Chaser shade to wrap that blue all the way around the room. Now we can caulk and paint everything 1 more time to finish this off. The built-in construction is complete! Alright everybody, I can't wait to show you how this turned out. As I always say here, use your imagination. The room is not complete yet, the walls still need a lot of work, but we're filling in the picture gradually. Next week I'm going to be adding lots of shelves, adding tons of books and styling here, so that will really complete the look. But for now, check out the hidden storage and let me know what you think about how it turned out down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon.